Welcome, friend. You have found a quiet space, a place where the noise of the world fades away, where stories soothe the mind and ancient wisdom helps you rest. Tonight, I'll guide you through a sacred story, one that changed the course of human history. This is the story of a prince, a man who left behind everything to seek peace, truth, and awakening. So get comfortable, let your body relax, and let this story carry you gently into sleep. If you enjoy these peaceful journeys, feel free to like this video and subscribe for more calming stories every week. Your support helps keep this sanctuary alive. Now, let's begin. The Four Sights That Awakened the Buddha, a story that changed the world. In a time before empires fell and borders were drawn, in a land of mountains, mango trees, and sacred chants, there lived a prince. His name was Siddhartha Gautama, and from the moment he was born, the world bent around him. He had wealth, beauty, power, but no one told him about pain. No one whispered the truth of time, or loss, or death, until one day he saw it, not in books, not in dreams, with his own eyes. Four quiet glimpses of reality that shattered everything he believed. These are the four sights, the moments that ended a lie and awakened a man who would change the world forever. Chapter 1. Life in the Palace. The sun rose gently over the kingdom of Kapilavastu. Its golden light spilled across tall towers, polished courtyards, and flower-lined balconies. The air smelled of jasmine and honey. Birds sang freely, and the palace awoke, not with the cries of burden, but with the soft rustle of silk. Within its walls lived Siddhartha Gautama, the beloved prince. His skin untouched by wind, his feet unsoiled by dust, the world around him was choreographed to perfection. A ballet of beautiful design to shield him from life's harsher truths. From the moment he was born, Siddhartha's life was not his own. The stars themselves were said to shimmer differently the night he arrived. Wise men gathered at his birth, and their eyes grew wide in awe. They whispered two fates into the ears of his father, King Suddhodana. This child will become either a great emperor or a great spiritual leader. The king did not hesitate. He would raise a ruler. He ordered his court to craft a world where sorrow had no place. Aging, illness, and death. These were not words for royal ears. Pain was an illusion, misery a myth. And so, a dream was built around the boy. The palace grounds stretched far and wide, more like a kingdom than a home. There were 7 gardens, each more lavish than the last. Fountains sang lullabies, birds from distant lands filled the trees. Even the seasons bowed to Siddhartha's comfort, for it was said no wind dared chill his skin. Each day began with the scent of incense and ended in music. The finest tutors taught him not only letters and numbers, but philosophy, swordsmanship, poetry, and the art of dance. But the lessons were gentle, nothing harsh, nothing real. No one aged in the palace. Servants who grew old were quietly replaced. No one limped, no one coughed, no one died. And so, Siddhartha grew in a bubble of perfection, where flowers bloomed without effort and smiles never faltered. But even within paradise, something stirred, a question, a longing, a flicker of unrest. As a child, he would often stare beyond the palace gates, asking his nursemaids, "What lies beyond those walls?" They would smile sweetly. "More gardens, my prince, more beauty." But that answer never satisfied him. Years passed. He became a man, tall, graceful, with eyes like still water, deep and searching. The kingdom adored him. Ministers bowed low. Artists sang his praises. The people called him the jewel of Kapilavastu. When he was 16, the king arranged a marriage. The bride, Yasodhara, was said to be the most graceful woman in the land. Their wedding was a spectacle of gold and garlands. Trumpets echoed for miles. They loved each other, not with fire, but with warmth, steady, gentle. Soon after they had a child, a son. They named him Rahula. To the world, Siddhartha had everything: wealth, power, a beautiful wife, a healthy child, a kingdom that adored him. But in the quiet moments, as the sun dipped below the garden walls, Siddhartha would sit alone beneath the Bodhi trees, and he would listen, not to music, not to laughter, but to something else, something deeper, something pulling at his soul like the tide. He could not name it, but he felt it, a quiet truth knocking at the door of his heart. And though he smiled, the questions returned. What lies beyond the walls? Why do the servants avoid my gaze when I ask about the outside? Why does the wind feel different when it slips through the gate? One evening, while holding his son, Siddhartha whispered, "Is this truly all there is?" The baby cooed, his tiny fingers wrapped around the father's thumb. Siddhartha kissed the boy's head, but his eyes drifted toward the horizon, and in the silence that followed, the dream began to unravel. Chapter 2. The First Sight. Aging. It began with a simple request. "I wish to see the world," Siddhartha told his father, "even for a day." King Suddhodana, startled but calm, concealed his worry behind a smile. "Of course, my son," he said. "I will arrange everything." He instructed his ministers to clean the streets, to remove the sick, to hide the old, to send the poor to the outskirts. Siddhartha would see the world, yes, but only the version painted in gold. The next morning, Siddhartha climbed into his chariot, accompanied by his loyal charioteer, Channa. The gates opened slowly, creaking as if reluctant to release their prince. Siddhartha breathed in the morning air. It was cooler than the palace gardens, real, earthy. They rolled past bustling streets. Merchants smiled too wide. Children played, but only in tidy lanes. Flowers were placed along the road. It was too perfect. Still, it was new, and Siddhartha was awestruck. But then, something shifted. Near a shaded tree, he saw a man, bent over, thin, slow. His hands trembled, his back hunched, his hair was white, his skin sagging and lined. The man leaned on a stick, each step an effort. Siddhartha sat up in his chariot. "Channa," he said, "what is wrong with that man?" Channa paused. "He is old, my prince." "Old?" "Yes, his body has weakened. His youth has passed. This is what happens to all who live long enough." Siddhartha blinked. "Will this happen to me?" Channa lowered his eyes. "Yes, my lord, it happens to us all." A strange silence fell between them. The wheels kept turning, the birds still sang, but inside Siddhartha, a tremor began. He looked again at the old man, who now shuffled into the shade, unseen by most. This man had once been like him, a child, perhaps a prince, perhaps a father, and now he was bent and forgotten. Siddhartha's gaze turned inward. He thought of his father, older now than when Siddhartha was born. He thought of his tutors, some of whom had grey in their beards. He thought of himself. "I did not know," Siddhartha whispered. "I did not know the body changed like this." Channa's voice was gentle. "My prince, we are born, we grow, and if we are lucky, we grow old. It is the way of the world." The wind brushed Siddhartha's face, but it felt colder now. Aging was not a punishment. It was not a curse. It was simply truth. And truth, he realized, had been missing from his life. The ride continued, but Siddhartha's joy had changed into thought, reflection, a deep stirring. That night, he returned to the palace, different. He did not speak of the gardens or the painted smiles. He thought only of that old man, and the truth that all things beautiful must one day fade. Chapter 3. The Second Sight. Illness. Days passed, but peace did not return. The image of the old man haunted Siddhartha's thoughts. The idea that his youth, was fleeting, fading even now, disturbed something deep inside him. It was not fear, exactly, but an unraveling. He had tasted truth, and once truth touches the soul, illusions begin to crack. One morning, Siddhartha rose early. He stood by the palace gate, wrapped in thought. "I must go out again," he told Channa. Channa hesitated. He remembered the king's command. But he saw the resolve in Siddhartha's eyes. He nodded. "As you wish, my prince." The chariot rolled through the city once more, but this time no orders were sent ahead. No streets were cleaned. No faces were painted with false joy, and the world, now unfiltered, revealed itself. As they passed the market, Siddhartha's eyes searched their faces. They were lined, tired, real. They turned down a narrow alley where the sun barely reached. There, lying on a pile of rags, was a man, his body twisted in pain, his eyes fluttered, barely open. His skin, once brown and golden like earth, was pale and wet with sweat. His breathing came in sharp, uneven bursts. Each gasp seemed to pull him closer to the end. A woman sat beside him, wiping his brow with a damp cloth. Her hands trembled, her lips moved in prayer. A child clung to her leg, silent and still. Siddhartha stopped the chariot. He stepped down slowly, his eyes locked on the man. "What has happened to him?" he asked. Channa stood beside him. "He is sick, my lord." "Sick?" "Yes. His body has turned against itself. It is burning with fever. The muscles fail, the mind fades. This is illness." Siddhartha knelt beside the woman. "Can anything be done?" She looked at him, surprised by his presence. Then, slowly, she shook her head. "We have tried everything," she whispered. "Herbs, water, prayer, but he only worsens." The child looked at Siddhartha, not with hope, but with an ancient sadness no child should carry. Siddhartha turned to Channa. "Does this happen often?" Channa nodded. "Every day, to rich and poor alike. Illness does not choose." "Will it happen to me?" Channa's voice was low. "Yes, my prince. The body is delicate. None escape its weakness." A breeze moved through the alley, stirring the dust. Siddhartha stood, his face pale. He looked at his own hands, strong, steady, unmarked by disease. But now he saw them differently, temporary, fragile. He had trained with swords, wrestled with friends, danced for crowds. But what were muscles to a burning fever? What was grace to shaking limbs? Nothing, nothing at all. They rode on in silence. But Siddhartha's thoughts roared. He thought of Rahula, his infant son. What if one day the body of my son fails? He thought of Yasodhara, her laughter, her touch. What if one day she cried out in pain, and he could do nothing? He thought of his own body, perfect, trained, admired, but now meaningless. Illness was not punishment. It was not sin. It was a part of life. A shadow that could fall at any moment. When they returned to the palace, Siddhartha said nothing. He walked to his chambers, removed his royal cloak, and sat in the dark. The palace was still, but within him something was changing. He had seen age, he had seen sickness, and he knew he would never see the world the same way again. Chapter 4. The Third Sight. Death. The days that followed were heavy. Siddhartha spoke little. He walked the gardens at dawn and sat by the pools at dusk. He no longer played with Veena. He no longer smiled at the flowers. His heart had been marked, not with fear, but with a question that now followed him like a shadow. If we age, if we fall ill, what lies at the end of that path? He had to know. Once again, Siddhartha summoned Channa. "I want to leave the palace," he said, "but take me where no one has prepared the streets. Let me see what truly is." Channa bowed. This time, there would be no disguises, no sweeping, no silks on the windows. They rode quietly through the city, turning down an unfamiliar road where the music of the markets faded into a hush. There, beneath the shade of a banyan tree, a crowd had gathered. No music played, no colors flew. There were no dancers or smiles, only silence, and the sound of quiet weeping. 4 men carried a body wrapped in white. The cloth was thin, the shape beneath it still. Women followed close behind, heads bowed. One held a young boy in her arms. The child did not cry. He only stared, empty-eyed. Smoke drifted in the air. A pyre waited ahead. Siddhartha's chest tightened. He stepped down from the chariot and walked toward the scene. "What is this?" he asked. Channa joined him, his eyes lowered. "A funeral, my prince." Siddhartha stared at the wrapped figure. "And the man beneath the cloth?" "He is dead," Channa said softly. "His life has ended. His body will return to ash." Siddhartha's voice, barely a whisper. "Dead?" "Yes. He breathes no more. He speaks no more. He feels no more." Siddhartha turned to the mourners. Their faces held grief, but also familiarity. This wasn't their first time they had done this, and it wouldn't be the last. He looked at the pyre. The fire was not yet lit, but it waited. He thought of the old man. He thought of the man in the alley. He thought of himself. "Will this happen to me?" he asked. "Yes," said Channa. "To all of us. Death comes for kings and beggars alike. It does not ask permission." The boy in the crowd looked up. Their eyes met. In that moment, Siddhartha saw his own son. He saw Rahula standing one day beside a fire, his own father beneath a cloth. He saw Yasodhara weeping, her hands pressed together. He saw himself, cold and still. And he saw the truth. Everything he loved, everyone he knew, would one day be taken. Not by cruelty, not by punishment, but by nature, aging, illness, death. These were not curses. They were companions of life, inevitable, inescapable. The illusion was shattered now, entirely. The palace he grew up in was not a home. It was a mask. And the world he now saw, raw, fragile, honest, was the only world that had ever truly existed. They stood for a long time as the fire was lit. The smoke rose slowly. Siddhartha did not cry, but his soul trembled. He turned to Channa. "We must return," he said. Channa nodded. The wheels turned once more, but this time they sounded like echoes. That night, Siddhartha lay awake, his son's breathing beside him, his wife's hand resting on his chest. He looked up at the ceiling, and for the first time, he felt the weight of being alive. Chapter 5. The Fourth Sight. The Monk. Siddhartha could not sleep. Even with the comfort of silken pillows and scented air, he lay awake, staring into the darkness. He could still see the fire, still smell the smoke, still feel the weight of what he had witnessed: aging, illness, death. Not ideas anymore, not stories told by fearful voices. They were real, and now they lived inside him. At sunrise, He asked Channa to prepare the chariot. No destination, no purpose, just a need to see, to breathe the world again. Channa said nothing. He saw the change in his prince, the way he carried silence like a cloak, the way his eyes searched not for pleasure, but for meaning. They rode slowly through the outskirts of the city. The markets had not yet opened. The streets were quiet. And then, without ceremony, without warning, they saw him. A man walking alone. Barefoot, head shaved, wrapped in a simple robe dyed the colour of ochre. No servants, no sword, no crown. He walked with calm purpose, his eyes soft and lowered. His hands held nothing, his face held peace. Siddhartha leaned forward. Who is that? Channa looked. A wandering monk, my lord. Siddhartha watched as the man passed a group of children. They bowed slightly, and the monk returned a quiet nod, without pause or pride. The children giggled, then returned to play. Siddhartha asked, "Why does he live this way?" Channa answered, "He has given up all things, possessions, home, status. He seeks not comfort, but truth. He lives on little, eats only what is given, sleeps where the ground allows, and spends his days in meditation, in solitude, in study." The monk reached a tree and sat beneath it, his closed eyes, and smiled. Siddhartha stared. There was no fear in him, no sadness, no grasping, only stillness. A quiet mind, a steady breath, a being at peace. Siddhartha stepped down from the chariot. He did not approach the monk. He simply stood nearby, watching. He listened to the silence around the man. Not empty, but full. And within that silence, something in Siddhartha shifted. The old man had shown him time. The sick man had shown him pain. The dead man had shown him the end. But this monk showed him the way through it all. Siddhartha returned to Channa. His voice was steady. "I understand now," he said. Channa waited. "There is another path, one not ruled by desire or fear, a path not of escape, but of awakening." The chariot turned slowly back towards the palace. But Siddhartha did not look behind him. He looked inward. And in that still morning hour, he made a quiet vow to leave behind the golden cage, to step into uncertainty, to follow the path of the monk, to seek not comfort, but freedom. Chapter 6. The Great Renunciation. That night, the palace was quiet, not with peace of contentment, but with the silence before a storm. The halls, once alive with music and footsteps, felt hollow. The moon poured through carved windows, washing the stone floors with pale silver. Siddhartha stood alone in his chamber. He had not eaten, he had not slept. He walked to the window. and looked up on the courtyard. The lotus pools shimmered in the dark. The guards stood at ease. No one suspected what he was preparing. His heart beat calmly. There was no fear in him, only resolve. He turned, walked to the cradle where his son Rahula lay sleeping. The child's chest rose and fell gently. A tiny fist curled beneath his chin. Siddhartha knelt beside him. "My son," he whispered, "forgive me." He brushed Rahula's soft cheek with the back of his hand. "I leave not to abandon you. I leave to find something greater. A path that may one day free us all." Tears welled in his eyes, but did not fall. He walked softly to the bed where Yasodhara slept, her form outlined by moonlight. Her breathing was deep and even. She had no idea. He stood at the threshold, fingers gripping the doorframe. He longed to speak, to wake her, to explain everything, but he did not. He knew what her eyes would ask, and he would have no answer that could ease the pain, so he turned away. Down silent corridors he walked, past painted murals and golden statues, past memories. He came to the royal stables where Channa waited, faithful, silent, understanding. The horse Kanthaka stood ready, white as snow, eyes steady, a companion of many years. Siddhartha mounted without a word. The palace gates creaked open. The world beyond them was not lit with lamps or music. It was cold, still, unknown, and yet it welcomed him. They rode through forests, under moonlight and shifting stars. The silence of the trees was not empty. It was sacred. Each hoofbeat was a heartbeat. Each breath a prayer. When they reached the edge of a wooded grove, Siddhartha dismounted. He stepped into the grass. "This is far enough," he said. Channa looked at him. "My prince." "No," Siddhartha interrupted. "I am no longer a prince." He removed his sword, his ornaments, his royal sash. He untied the golden cloth from his waist and placed it in Channa's hands. "Take these back to my father. Tell him I must walk a different road." Channa's eyes welled with tears, but he did not argue. Siddhartha then took a blade and cut his hair. The strands fell silently into the grass. He stood there, barefoot, simple, free. He turned to Kanthaka and placed a hand on the horse's head. "Thank you, my friend," he whispered. Then he looked to the forest. It was dark, it was vast, but he stepped forward. With each stride, the world he had known faded behind him. The palace, the silks, the titles, the fear, gone. He was no longer a prince. He was no longer protected. He was a seeker. And his journey, his true journey, had finally begun. Chapter 7. The Path of Struggle and Awakening. The forest was unlike anything Siddhartha had ever known. There were no guards, no servants, no walls, only trees that whispered to one another and wings that carried the scent of earth and bark. The air was cool and damp. The world was silent, and yet completely alive. Siddhartha wandered alone. At first, he knew little of how to live without luxury. The days were long, the nights were cold, his feet ached, his body grew thin. But he did not return back. He ate from the palms of strangers. He slept beneath trees. He listened to the rhythms of his breath. And slowly the prince disappeared. In his place stood a seeker, ragged, quiet, alert. Eyes that once gazed on gold now watched ants cross stones. Ears that once heard only song now listened for the truth in silence. He met other seekers, men who believed that truth could be found by denying the body, starving it, punishing it, stripping it of all comfort. Siddhartha joined them. For 6 long years he followed this path. He ate so little his bones pressed against the skin. He meditated for days, unmoving. He held his breath until he fainted. Pain became his companion, discomfort his teacher. He hoped that if he could overcome the body, he would overcome suffering. But one day, as he knelt beside a river, he heard a lute being tuned. A string too loose, and it would not play. A string too tight, and it would snap. In that simple sound, he understood. Truth was not in excess, but it was not in denial either. It was in balance, the middle way. Siddhartha stood. He stepped into the river, washed away the dirt and hunger of his years, and emerged in with new clarity. The other ascetics watched in silence. They called him weak. They said he had abandoned the path. But Siddhartha did not look back. He sat beneath a great tree, the Bodhi tree, and he made a vow. I will not rise until I have found the truth. He closed his eyes. The wind passed through the branches. Birds flew and returned. The stars spun in the sky, and Siddhartha waited, not hoping, not fearing, just being, until, at last, the final veil fell, and in that stillness, he awakened. Chapter 8: Reflection and Legacy. And so, beneath the Bodhi tree, Siddhartha became something more than a seeker. He became the Buddha, the awakened one. Not through miracles, not through wealth or conquest, but by seeing the world as it truly is. He rose, not to claim the throne, but to share a path, a way out of suffering and into peace. He taught not dogma, but understanding, not commandments, but mindfulness. He spoke of impermanence, of compassion, of the power of presence. And from that quiet place of realization, his voice rippled across time, from village to village, mountain to mountain, century to century, until it reached you. You, who lives in a world not unlike his, a world full of distractions, illusions, desires, fears, but also a world full of potential. Because like Siddhartha, you too have a choice. To turn inward, to question what you've been taught, to see with new eyes, You don't need a palace to wake up. You don't need to run away to the forest. You only need to begin where you are. Notice the aging around you, the sickness you carry or witness, the presence of death that gives meaning to life, but also the monk within you, the part of you that already knows there is a gentler way to live. There is peace beyond the noise. There is freedom, not from the world, but from how we suffer in it. And like Siddhartha, you too can walk the path. Not someday, but now.